Hey everybody, it's Chris Eads, known online as Wootini, here with another Gay Gamer video podcast. I want to start by talking about a couple of movies, because now that I have the lovely Movie Pass, basically everything, I feel like I paid my $9.95 to see it, which I very much enjoyed, and now everything I see until the middle of October is free. I mean, you can also say, well, I've seen 3 movies so far, so that's like, you know, $3.50 a piece, or whatever it works out to. That's not right, $3.60 or something. But anyway, I'd like to think that they're free, especially because one of them I'm glad I did not actually pay money out of my own pocket for. First, I saw the very controversial Mother. That's Mother! With an exclamation point. Which, it skirted the borderline of being well up itself, but, it wasn't exactly, because I knew going into it, that it was like a biblical allegory kind of thing. That's how some people were interpreting it. And it's interesting because I wonder if I went into it blank, how I would have interpreted it. Because going into it, having heard that, that's what I saw. And honestly, having seen it, that's very clearly what this was intended to be. I know Aronofsky is being all like, oh, make your own interpretations, but, like, there's so much in there that is, like, so clearly, like, parallel to, you know, Bible stories and whatever, and I'm just like, okay, this is, I get it. Because some other people are interpreting it as, like, you know, a creator and his creation and the writer and all that sort of thing, which you can, but based on everything else that's going on, that's not as... I feel like that doesn't cover everything that goes on in this picture. Also, when an artist makes something about being an artist, it tends to be a little up its own ass, you know? So I would prefer the biblical one. But it's also interesting because I feel that the opening of the film sets everything up. Because the commercials and the trailers were very misleading. They made this sound like, oh, it's Jennifer Lawrence in a horror movie. And, like, our local theater had it on 2 screens, and it made, like, no money. Because everyone hated it. Because I feel like the general movie public, like, went to go see this thinking, oh, Jennifer Lawrence in a horror movie, and they all just enjoyed it, so let's go see this horror movie. And it's not. That's not what this is. At all. So, they were all just like, this is horrible, this is awful. Also, I know that a lot of women are very upset about a couple of scenes at the end of the film, which are upsetting, but purposefully so. That's the point. So, like, those trailers and commercials were very misleading, and I feel like you go and you watch this movie, and the very opening scene of the film, like, it sets everything up, and I'm like, okay, like, that's clearly not what this is. You know? It very clearly sets up this world, these characters, and what kind of a world this is. So I didn't have a problem with anything that happened afterwards. Like, I didn't feel like it was misleading. Part of me wishes that it hadn't done that, because I feel like it set up too much, and it had started just, like, a couple minutes into the movie. And if it started with her waking up, then I'm like, it would have been kind of interesting, because you would have been watching it going, this isn't quite right, something's wrong, something's a little off, what's going on? But you had to have that opening so that the ending would make sense. It all works of a piece. So I get it. And I actually feel like that opening is better, like I said, because then it's not misleading, like those trailers were. Because if you had gone to see this, which is why I don't understand, like, people got upset. It's like, it very clearly states up front, this is not what you're expecting. If you were expecting a Jennifer Lawrence horror movie, right away you know that's not what this is. But I also get the whole, like, horror, like, people are just like, this is stupid, you know. But I actually kind of liked it. I don't know that it's anything that I would watch again. but it was interesting. It might be worth a rewatch just to see if I, to see things that I might have missed. But I certainly enjoyed that better than what I saw the next day, which was Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Kingsman: The Secret Service is great fun. If you have never seen that movie, it's great. It's based on a comic book series, which I've never read, but it might also be good. I don't know. But the movie's great fun. It's kind of like a modern takeoff on, like, British spy, like James Bond kind of thing. There's a spy agency, but it's all, like, super crazy, and there's all kinds of ultra-violence and these amazing action set pieces. And it's great. And it has a great soundtrack, too. Because when I rewatched it, I watched it last week to, like, before I saw the sequel. I'm like, oh, let me rewatch the first one so it's, fresher in my mind. So, like, that struck me. I was like, this movie has a really good soundtrack. Well-chosen songs for these scenes. But, so I was excited to go into the sequel. And it starts off fine. There's a great car chase action sequence that's just terrific. And then it proceeds to go completely off the rails. And I was so disappointed. Especially since I had just rewatched the first one, which is so solid and so entertaining and so much fun. And this one was just, it wasn't as funny. The action sequences weren't as clever. It was also longer and poorly paced. There was a lot of draggy stuff. The villain is a lot less interesting. They also make some questionable choices as far as subplots and removing certain characters from the canvas, which they bring back some characters and then they remove other characters, and it just didn't work. I feel like I also feel like they also were going for, like, these emotional moments that they didn't quite earn, because it's kind of it's this comedic heightened reality with, like, sci-fi cybernetic arms and all this kind of nonsense. So, like, these wild spy gadgets and everything. So it's this heightened reality, so it's really hard to get those, like, sincere dramatic moments. It can be done, but they didn't do it. And, I think towards the end they go for this big dramatic moment, and it just did not work for me. So I was super annoyed at that. Also, the whole point is that they introduced the Statesman, which is like the United States version of the Kingsman, and they're all, like, Southern Americans with these Western outfits, and Pedro Pascal plays he's tequila with, like, a frickin' lasso, which is all CGI and whatever, but it's kind of neat the first time. Then it's less neat later when he does it again. But it's like, it's just not, like, I don't want Americans in my British spy movies. I don't like it when James Bond does it either. And it also, I feel like there's certain things, like the way that they portray the President of the United States of America is, like, he's an idiot and he's corrupt, so he's clearly a Republican. But, like, it's not Trump. They did this before that, so they didn't do that. That would have been horrifying. But, like, the way they portray the president, I feel like if they had done that with the Statesman and had the American version of the Kingsman being, like, these stupid, idiotic Western motif characters that were all, like, complete stereotypes and whatever, that would be, maybe funny. But they didn't do that. They're just sort of, like, Southern Western stereotypes, but not really. They're, like, treated like a normal character, even though he's wearing cowboy hats and twirling a lariat. And also, Halle Berry is in it, and she's, like, super boring. And Channing Tatum is in it, and he's super boring. So, it was not good. Like, it's such a sequel that's like, let's take what's good about the first one and try to do it again, but we're not going to do it as well, and we're going to try to do other things that completely make it fall apart. Like, my husband called it a backdoor pilot. Back in the day, they used to take a popular series and they would, like, have an episode where it's like, let's introduce these other characters. So the main characters on the show are, like, not really in that. There's just a couple of them, and then they introduce these other things. And if people responded well to that, they would get their own show. They'd get like a spin-off, you know? And I feel like this was like this is like a backdoor pilot for the Statesman movie. And I'm like, nobody's going to want to see that because those characters are terrible. But they're not terrible enough that it's making fun of Americans, which would have maybe been fun. So don't bother with Kingsman, The Golden Circle. But check out Mother if you're curious, because it's interesting. It's definitely worth a watch. Just so you can form your own opinion of it. As for games, I finished the Project Octopath Traveler demo. It was funny because, like I said last time, I went through the dungeon, I interacted with the characters, I went through the dungeon, I fought the boss, and then I kept going. And I was like, oh, this keeps going. But then once I got to the next town where I met the other character in the demo, Ulbrich, we just sort of wandered up towards where the boss would be, but then it was just an empty room, and I was just like, what have I done wrong? And I looked it up online, and it turns out somebody was like, oh yeah, if you're playing the Primrose story, there's nothing there. That's his boss. That's Ulbrich's boss. So, like, I was like, okay, I'm done. So I stopped, and I restarted, and I played as him to see what his story was. But then, after his boss fight, like, I did the story in the town, and then I started to wander off, and I'm like, well, presumably I'm just going to wander my way back down and go to Primrose's town, and then meet her, and then presumably fight through that dungeon and get to where the boss fight would be, but there won't be a boss fight because we're not fighting her boss, because she fought her boss. So, while I love this demo, and I'm totally buying this game when it comes out, the demo did not answer my one big question, which is, how is this game going to play? I mentioned this last week. I don't know if you're meant to pick a character, play through it, and it's only going to be like a 10 to 15 hour game, and then you're meant to pick another character and play through it from their perspective. Because I didn't play Ulbrich meeting Primrose, but I played Primrose meeting him, and it was basically, you get a little text screen that says, you know, you can recruit the other players into your party. And then it just sort of happens. But there's no like interaction or dialogue between the characters. I'm hoping in the eventual game there will be. I mentioned this in the survey, because Nintendo sent a survey like a few days after I downloaded the demo. They're like, hey, thanks for playing the demo, let us know what you thought of it. And I'm like, I'm still playing it, I'll let you know when I'm done. And I have actual opinions. But also, the combat with Ulbrich was a lot easier this time around. A, because he's a fighter, so he's stronger and has better defense and whatever than Primrose, who's a belly dancer. But also because now, like I said last week, there's the, you know, boost points that you get in battle that you can use to attack multiple times or boost your special attacks by multiple levels. So knowing that, I was able to, you know, and breeze right through everything. And, you know, I fought a bunch of battles, and then I was like, I could, now that I have more gold, I could double back and get better armor before I go face the boss, but I was like, I got this, I can totally take him. And I did. But I'm still curious how the actual game will play out as you start as one character, then meet the other characters. Do you then play as them for a bit? Or can you switch between them to get everyone's parts of the story? Or, you know, like, how is that going to work with these 8 characters? So I'm still intrigued about that. But, I mean, regardless, I'm still going to buy this game because what I played is fantastic. It's a little, the dialogue is a little overwrought, but it's fine for an RPG. Like, you expect that sort of drama. The problem is the voice acting. The voice acting is really over the top. I thought about mentioning that in the survey, but I didn't, because I'm like they care. Like, at this point, they've done the voice acting. It's not like they're going to look at a survey and see, because I'm sure I can't be the only one who thinks this, that, oh, they don't like the voice acting, let's start over and do it again. No. So, I didn't feel like that was worth mentioning. But, it's a bit much. But yeah, if you have a Switch, definitely download that demo from the eShop and give it a try. If you like RPGs, that is. Who doesn't like RPGs? Some people don't. So that, I'm still very excited about that. Although, like I said last time, that doesn't come out until next year. So the next big Switch game that I'm super looking forward to is in November when Skyrim comes out. It's funny because I actually, last week I was like, I don't know why I was thinking of Skyrim on the Switch, but I just went to YouTube to see like, I wanted to see some footage of it in action, So I was looking, and, because there was some in the Direct, but I wanted to see some more. And there were a bunch of people who had, like, video footage of them, like, playing it at, like, Tokyo Game Show and whatever. And it looks fantastic. The problem in what's killing me is it still looks good, but it doesn't look as good as I feel like it should, because all these people keep playing it in third person. And I'm like, who is playing a Bethesda game in third person? Who does that? It looks terrible. I always do that, like, whenever I get a new Bethesda game. Like, when I got Skyrim, I started playing it, I create my character, and I start playing it, and at a certain point, I do switch to, like, in the beginning, I'll switch to third-person view just to see what I look like. And move around a little. But the animation is always so bad that I immediately switch back to first-person view, because first-person I prefer. I've mentioned this before. It's a much more immersive way to play a video game for me. I love it. So, putting it in third just doesn't look good. And I always feel like Bethesda know that, like, 5% of their players are going to play this in third person, so they don't really put a lot into the third-person animation. I will say that the other characters that you're interacting with, they also, like in fighting, they also seem to be a little stiff, but I don't know if that's because it's on the Switch, or if that's how it played on my 360. I don't recall, because that was quite a few years ago. But I'm still totally psyched for Skyrim on the go. Also, naturally, I played a lot of No Man's Sky this week. Because as I mentioned last week, they fixed it. So that with the latest update, I was able to start that big mission, the story. I was able to get the story to start in the system in which I was in. So I didn't have to go all the way back to that other system. So that was great. However, as I mentioned last week, I wanted to mention again, sometimes it's fine because I'm doing stuff and it's like, okay, now go over here and do this, and now go over here and do that. It gives you something to do. But after a certain point, I'm sort of like, okay, like, it's got me running around within this one system, or, like, multiple locations on one planet, and I'm like, I'd gotten so used to, like, checking out a planet, checking out a planet, checking out a planet, going to the next system, and just keep moving, always seeing something new, a new planet, new systems. So to suddenly be stuck in one system doing things like that, I was like, Then things took another turn, because basically in order to continue the story, the Traveler story, I need to make this device. But in order to make that device, I need to make these two other products in order to make that device. One is a circuit board, which I now have the recipe for, and the other one, I don't think I have the recipe for that yet. So basically that meant I had to go back to my base to get those recipes. Unfortunately, because with this Atlas Rises update, there's all these new recipes and stuff that you learn, the whole base building story has to be started over. Because basically I had done that, and I had gotten all the weapon upgrades the Viking guy could give me, and I'd done all this other stuff, and I'm like, okay, fine. The problem is that, I had mentioned this in a previous episode, after the Atlas Rises update, I returned to my base planet, which was a lush, beautiful world, and it is now a barren wasteland. So there's like nothing on there. So the system where my base is, it's like, okay, now the scientist is like, okay, here's a coordinate, go and do this go find this building and get me this plan from this building. The problem is that the building is on another planet in the system, and it's like super far away in that system, and it takes me like a minute and a half to get there, and it's like super annoying. So that got a little frustrating, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, oh shit, to make those items that I need to make thing that I need for the story, like, I need, like, 250 frost roots, and I'm like, ugh, that's annoying. So now I got frustrated and I turned it off, and I'm like, this sucks. You're ruining the game for me. But now, again, like before, when I'm like, oh no, I find a way around that. So now I'm like, okay, but that's fine, because I can always teleport back to where my base is, and I can the teleport has a list of locations now, and they're the important locations, like where my base is and where the Traveler storyline is, you know, so I can go back to that system and continue the story, and then go back and whatever. So what I'm going to do is go back to exploring towards the center of the universe again, and as I go, I'll explore new planets and do new stuff, and then collect those items that I need and store them on my freighter, and once I have enough, I'll make those items, and then I'll go back to doing the story. So I'll probably just spend a few weeks just playing No Man's Sky the way I love to, which is just to explore. Then I'll go back and do the story again, because I can teleport back to those systems now, which is helpful. Because that's what was killing me, was when I started doing the story, it kept me in this system. It had me going to the different planets in the system, but it still had me in just the one system, and once I'd gone to the planets, it's like, okay, now go back to that planet. And I'm like, I've been to that planet, I've seen that planet, I want to see new planets. So I felt like it was stifling my exploratory urges. So now I'm just going to explore. And then I'll do the story again later. I'll go back to it when I feel like it. Well, when I've collected all those hundreds and hundreds of items. So that's it for me. And I'll see you back here next time, and we'll talk about some other stuff. I'll probably have seen more movies. Go check out MoviePass. If you like to go to the movies, it's a great deal. I'll see you back here next time. Happy gaming!